So, I've been doing some thinking.
Okay.
There's a lot of people at the table
Usually.
when we're playing D&D. Now, I feel like that's an untapped resource. Like, I mean, I do a lot of work prepping. You do a lot of work when you're running your games. Why is it all going to be on us?
So, you want to talk for a bit about how maybe we can split the load that the DM carries among the players as well
Yeah, I was just thinking they could add to the experience.
and lighten the load.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Hello and welcome to GameMasters Studio, where we'll be talking tabletop role-playing games, tips and tricks to help bring your game at home up to the next level. For today's topic, we'll be talking about players assisting the DM at the table and to help the game run a bit more smoothly. My name is Jared, aka Frieden.
I'm Jared, aka dm.f.
So, we're talking about something that we've used in our games so much that it's become second nature, and we realized that we should probably share it because it's a useful trick to help the games run smoothly, and that is the role of the assistant DM.
Yep.
Now, before we get started, we want to make sure that you understand that an assistant DM is different from what is commonly referred to as a rules lawyer.
Right, yeah.
So the rules lawyer is going to be the person who drags out the books and pulls out obscure rules to try to prove their point and try to, get one over on the DM or try to take control.
Yeah.
The assistant DM does a lot of the research and legwork and looking at the books in order to make the DM's life easier.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and you may see this at times if you're watching our Darkhound series, I'll often be jumping into the books to look up spell effects when someone's just talking about maybe using the spell, or if we've got questions on like, how does this rule work? So that Jared, who's running the game, can kind of focus on keeping things moving, understanding what the players want to do. And then I'm there if we need to get into how does this spell work, or how does this condition take place, then we have those rules available right at hand, and it doesn't stop the game while we look it up.
Right, yeah. I think that's one of the big important distinctions or things that you'll see different with a rules lawyer as opposed to like the assistant DM that we use. The rules lawyer, like Jerry said, is trying to basically, I guess, yeah, the best way to describe it would be like to one up the DM or to correct them, to be like the kind of like the know-it-all at the table. Whether they're always right in every situation or not is a whole nother story. But the assistant DM, they're the two most important, I'd say, traits of the assistant DM that's looking at rules and confirming things and checking them is to, first of all, timing, knowing when to bring up the information. They're going to let them finish the scene, and then at the end of that scene, or when the DM calls on them, they'll give them the information that they're looking for, and they're not correcting them, they're informing them. And then the other kind of subtext to that, or other trait that I would say is important, is tone and how it's communicated. So again, like I just mentioned, like you're informing the DM of the information. You're not correcting the DM on the information. You're not saying you did that wrong. You're just saying, so just so you know, this is how it's, this is what the book says.
I think that's a really important distinction too, is just saying, well, according to the book, it's this. Now, the according to the book part is really important because a DM has the right to say, no, even though it says that in the book, we're doing it this way in my game.
Right, yeah.
So the rules lawyer says, no, the game has to be this way. The assistant DM says, this is the baseline, but if you want to change it, just be aware that you're making a change.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Actually, I think another trait to add on that's very useful for the assistant DM is they should be an experienced player who knows the books.
Right.
Because it's important that they can find the information quickly and efficiently and be able to communicate that without holding the game up more when we need a consultation.
Right, yeah. Also, they're going to, because they're more experienced player or a DM themselves, they're going to kind of anticipate a lot of these situations, as soon as, David at the table starts mentioning that, like, oh, I want to grapple the giant, Jerry can be flipping through the book and like, okay, Jared might need to know the information on grappling. I got it ready to go. Or I'm going to cast X spell. Okay, well, let me have that spell ready to go just in case Jared needs, the information for it. So they're kind of anticipating, they're listening at the table, they're paying attention, and they can anticipate what is going to, the information that's going to be needed, instead of, hang on a second, guys, let's let Jerry, look this information up real quick and stopping the game.
Right. And, you have that anticipation. Being a DM yourself makes being an assistant DM easier. Jared and I have been gaming together for a number of years now, and it's just easy routine that if he's running, then I'm kind of assistant DMing. And when I'm running, I know that he's doing the same for me, covering my back. So you can use that to your advantage. You can also work with the other players to make it easier. I know in some of the games, you'll have somebody ask, hey, I have this ability on my sheet. What does that do? And you can give them the quick rundown and then flip to that page in the book. So when their turn comes around, they're like, I want to do this, which is what I just asked about. Mm-hmm. And now you have the full and complete rules there ready to go in case there's a question or confusion or a misunderstanding. But there's more that players can do at the table than just tapping that one to be the assistant DM.
Right.
You can spread out even to little less experienced players some of the bookkeeping that's involved, because there is a lot of it.
Yeah, there is a lot of bookkeeping at the table, and I think this is probably a big opportunity for the players to kind of step up. I think, assuming the DM's okay with this, obviously this is all DM's discretion. You use what you want to use from, any of the ideas in this podcast. But I think that there is a lot going on for the DM already. There's a lot of, like you said, bookkeeping, a lot of record keeping. So if you start to spread some of that tasking around the table, you can really kind of lighten the load, lighten your, relieve some of the burden. So one of the big things, the first thing that came to my mind when, spreading it around outside of what people might typically think of for bookkeeping was, like tracking initiative in combat.
Right. That's usually a clunky system. I feel like every DM I've played with has a different way of tracking initiative, and almost all of them involve a lot of work on the DM's part,
right,
where they're trying to figure out who's going when and keeping track of all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you have a player tracking the initiative, then it's one less for the DM to have to worry about during combat, because during combat, there's already a lot going on for the DM. Also, I think a good idea, like if I was going to task, this is one of those jobs that you could kind of, delegate to different players throughout either the night or every session, change who's going to track it. But I personally think that I would probably give it to the player. If you have a player that tends to zone out a little bit during combat, not really pay attention when it's not their turn, or just kind of be a little flighty in general, this is probably the most likely the person that I would delegate this job to right off the bat, and probably be my go-to for all eternity, or at least until that trait kind of goes away, I guess. But that way, that if they're the one tracking the initiative, they're always going to know when it's their turn. They're not going to be, is it my turn? I guess I'm going to cast this fireball spell. I wasn't really ready for it.
Hey, what's going on? I was paying attention. Did you move?
Yeah. What'd you do? What's going on? Where's the orc? What's going? Oh, there's a troll here. Okay. Yeah. So they're tracking the initiative. They have to be paying attention. Hey, Jerry, you're up next. Okay, after Jerry, David's going. Okay, after David, it's going to be the orc's turn, then the troll, and then Ashley gets to go. Okay, now it's my turn again. They're always going to know where they are in the combat. They have to be paying attention. It's, if they're not paying attention, the whole combat falls apart. And that's going to be a little, that's when you can kind of use peer pressure to your advantage, because everyone's going to be kind of looking to that person to know what's going on. So they're always, again, they'll be prepared. When it's their turn, they're going to know it's their turn. They'll be able to think about what's going on, pay attention the whole time, and, just have your combats run a lot smoother, because you're not being held up by this one rusty cog.
And it can even be really useful and efficient if you have multiple people that are like that, because you've got multiple people that are kind of zoning out during combat. You give one of them the role of initiative, the track, and make sure that their job not only is to keep track of initiative, but when you tell somebody that it's their turn, you also tell the person who's going next that they're coming up next, or they're on deck.
Right.
I've had games that have used that, and it can help move combat along, because while player A is taking their turn, player B is thinking about what they want to do on their turn, rather than, okay, it's your turn. Okay, hang on while I think about what we're doing.
Right, yeah.
So that way you can move it up and speed it up, and you're not putting the burden of drawing in people and keeping them paying attention on the DM.
Right.
We shifted that burden over to the player.
Another one that can help with combats is having, and again, completely DM's discretion. Some DMs will very much scoff at this kind of concept or idea, but having one of the players track the hit points of the monsters or NPCs in the combat. Now, there's a couple different ways you can approach that, especially if you're one of the DMs where you don't want them to know the total hit points of the monster because you don't want them to know, how close to death they might be. You don't want them to kind of feel like any relief as they might be, about to kill the giant troll for the, or the giant third troll.
He's only got 5 hit points left.
Yeah.
Don't waste a big spell on him. Just magic missile him.
Right, yeah, exactly. So the two different ways you could do this, if you're going to have a player track the HP, is to just have them keep track of the total damage, which means you just need to check in with them or have them give you the running tally every time that monster or NPC takes damage, and you just have the totals written, in your notes. So you can like, okay, the bandit's taken 48 damage total after that last fireball. Okay, well, I know that at 46 he's dead, so he falls dead. The other option would be to just let them know what the totals of all the NPCs or monsters are in the combat, so they can just count down the damage that they're taking, and then let you know like, okay, well that last one killed him, or he's close to death. He's only got like 20 hit points left, and just kind of keep the DM informed. Either way, the DM has to be informed, and there has to be some communication there. But it takes some of the bookkeeping and record keeping off their plate, so they can kind of focus more on the tactics and running the combat, and and making sure they're using nice descriptions during the combat, helping the players use descriptions. So I think it's a nice way to take some of the burden off.
There may be some arguments about people who say that the players shouldn't know what a monster's hit points are, but realistically speaking, in combat, you can probably tell that the guy who's bleeding from a dozen wounds is in worse shape than the guy who hasn't been touched yet. The players are going to know who they've hit, where they landed a solid blow. They're going to be able to see these people down a step, gasping for breath, trying desperately to keep their shield up because their arms are just feel like lead. They're going to be able to tell who's hurt and who's not. They may not have it to the exact precision of knowing a numerical hit points until they drop, but there's not going to be enough of a difference between getting that general idea from looking at them and having the exact number that's really going to impact your game negatively too much.
Right, yeah. It also you can, again, if you're having someone track these hit points and you're willing to let them know the totals, that player can help take some of the burden off you by them informing the table of where the creature, monster, NPC, whatever it is, stands. Not in the sense of like, hey guys, we got 5 hit points, don't waste that spell. But in this, I don't know how many times you hear in your typical D&D game, how badly does the monster look beat up? Like, you get that question a lot. If you're not actively describing at all points what they're looking like, you're going to get that question fairly often. So then you can kind of shift that question to the player, and the player can answer. It's like, okay, well, he had 100 hit points to start. He's down to 10. He looks pretty beat up, man. Like, and we're going to get into this a little bit more depth in a minute, but like you can start having him like jack up the description on it. Like, tell me how badly beat up he looks. Does it look like he's got a broken leg? Like, is his arm barely hanging on?
And 4th edition, even though some people don't like it, but 4th edition had a standard mechanic whereby at half hit points, creature or player was then considered to be bloodied.
Right.
So announcing the half hit point mark can help people keep a track on it as well.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the next piece of bookkeeping that we have is actually kind of been a standard for a while, so it's a lot of people may not think of it as sharing the burden, but that's doing the mapping, especially for dungeon crawls or places where the exact layout matters. The players making a map off the DM's description allows the DM to not have to worry about telling them, oh, well, there was this room back 3 corridors ago that you didn't go through the door on the east wall. Whoever's playing cartographer and keeping those maps should definitely have that laid out. I had an instance where my players went into Cobalt Warrens unprepared, and after the 3rd or 4th time that they returned back to the entrance because they got turned around after an hour, they're like, okay, we need to start mapping this.
Right, yeah.
Which, for me, was a little hilarious because the kobolds were like picking and annoying them the whole time, but they were also just getting lost in what I thought was a fairly simple cave complex. Mm-hmm. And then once they started mapping it, they realized where they kept getting turned around.
Right on, yeah. Yeah, and that's been, like you said, that's been a standard for a long time with the mapping kind of concept. But again, no one would really think of it as being an assistant. And another one, right in the same ballpark, is keeping track of treasure. It's almost pretty much every game that I've played in the last 10 years, no matter the group, there is a player keeping track of the treasure that's been gotten. If some groups, everyone tries to keep track of what they have. Every group I've been in, there's been one person. Like, I'm keeping track of everything that's been, we've gotten. We can divvy it up later, or I'm even keeping track. Like, this is everything that we've got. If you're keeping track of what you're getting of this share, that's fine. But everything that's been handed to us is on this sheet. It's all accounted for.
I find it almost seems like groups start off very competitive, and everybody's like, "Oh, I get this," or "I want to race to loot the bodies 1st."
Mm-hmm.
And then as they grow and develop as a group, they start thinking more team oriented and like, "Oh, well, we find 1,000 gold. Okay, we'll divvy it up when we get back to town. Just toss it in the bag of holding and note what we've got for now."
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people. As long as I know someone in the group's got it, we have it. I'm glad we're getting treasure. That's cool. Not important at the moment. I don't need it till I need it. So that pretty much covers most of the bookkeeping. If you can think of any other ideas, just let us know. Because the more we can spread out the love, the better. The next one is going to be descriptions. That's the next big area where we think there's a lot of opportunity.
And descriptions has some very interesting things when we first started talking about this, and we'll cover some of this. I had the ideas of using some of this in my game because it's a little bit of theory crafting and a little bit outside of the norm, but it seems like it could be really cool, fun, not only to help bring your players in to help build the world, but also to encourage them to maybe try DMing on their own down the road a little bit.
Yeah, so I already tried to get all my players to be more descriptive during combat. I don't want to know that you rolled a 17 and you did 20 damage. Obviously I want to know that, but I also, tell me, how you're attacking. You're swinging down with your greatsword and you're going to, try to, slash him right down his chest. And, which is another reason why I like to, personally, as a DM, I like to inform the players of the AC required to hit an enemy so they know whether they were successful or unsuccessful during an attack, so they can feed that into the description when they're telling you what they're doing. Okay, so, I'm going to swing with my giant greatsword, and I rolled a 17, so, I made contact. I'm going to slash him across his chest, opening up this big wound. They take, a whopping 20 points of damage because I used my great weapon mastery, and add 10 damage on, and blah, 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 and, everyone's having fun.
And this also ties in with players tracking monster hit points.
Right.
Because they may know that, I did enough damage to kill him, and that can lead to fun descriptions as well.
Right, exactly, yeah. Which is another huge opportunity in combat. Not only are you describing how you're attacking, but if you know that you've killed the monster, like you said, whether someone's tracking the HP for the DM or not, the DM will let you know, okay, well, that's going to kill him. Tell me how you're killing him. Let me know. Tell me this huge epic moment. Could make it cool. Not just, okay, I did 20 points to the orc, he's dead. So that's going to be, that was kind of the first, or something that I've already been doing. But I had this idea that what if we started sharing some more description around the table instead of me as the DM having to describe every single thing that, the players encounter or everything that should be described. If I kind of shared and started having them describe NPCs and locations and other various things, I think, it opens up a lot of possibilities. Also, instead of me trying to pull out what the inside of this tavern looks for the 4th tavern that night, you can, I have one of the players describe to me what they see as they come through, walk through the door. And you can even spread it around the table if it's a location. Okay, Jerry, what's the first thing that you see when you walk through the door? I see a beautiful bard maiden behind the bar. Okay, and what's the first thing that you notice, David? Oh, well, there's a nice polished oak wood floor. And okay, and Ashley, what do you see? I notice that there's a pair of swords hanging up on the wall, behind the bar maiden. Okay, yeah, and what do you see? Oh yeah, well, JR sees, that there's a bear skin rug that he is not too fond of. And they start just, describing the place, or you can put it on one player. Tell me what you see. Describe the tavern to me. Everything about it.
And other players should also be free to use those descriptions to kind of capitalize on it.
Right.
Like, let's say we walk into town. What's the first thing you notice?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the rogue, he's being a rogue. He's got the rogue mindset. First thing he notices is, hey, there's a bunch of guardsmen over there, and they're interrogating somebody. Might want to be careful, steer clear of that. And then somebody else at the table playing the paladin is like, whoa, there's an altercation going on. I want to get involved, see what's happening, see what we can help out with. And now you've gone from my players are giving a description just to add flavor to now we've got a little side plot, little hook thing that they came up with on their own, and the DM just takes that and runs with it and adds more flavor to the game, adds more detail to the characters, and you might come up with something interesting that they never planned.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Another thing that you run into constantly in your typical game is going to be tons and tons of NPCs. So by sharing with the players the option to describe some of these NPCs, especially your random NPCs or your middle tier NPCs, the ones that are a little less important. I mean, you're probably gonna still want to describe your big giant, big bad evil guy and your really important, the king and your really important NPCs. But the random NPCs and other ones that are less important, you can definitely feel free to Jerry, you meet this.
The tavern keeper.
Yeah, the tavern keeper. What? Describe to me the tavern keeper. Oh, well, most wouldn't expect to see, an orc in this town because it's mostly humans. But there's this old orc, with an eye patch and, a couple broken teeth. And, he comes, kind of wobbling down on this cane and he's got this long beard. And, so it's an orc tavern keeper. Never would have thought of that one. All right, cool, great.
And, your players should also, loosen up and have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a player who decides every game has to have a dwarf with a French accent.
Right.
You describe the tavern keeper. Well, here we go.
It's up to you whether or not you're going to have them name the NPCs or not. That's definitely their own little quirk. But I mean, if they're going to be running into a bunch of random NPCs all the time, then who cares? I mean, you probably don't even care what their the NPC's name is anyways. They're just there to fill the room and or just to give them a little piece of information to point them in the right direction. So you can have them name Steve and...
This is Steve the bartender. The last 5 bars we've been in, the bartender has all been named Steve.
Right, yeah. Which then you can capitalize on if you choose to. I mean, if they're naming, if they want to be funny and be silly and kind of try to exploit your little allowance or leniency of letting them describe and name NPCs.
They will.
Then you can kind of bite back with it. You had the idea of if they're going to name every bartender Steve, then
they wind up having to meet up with an informant who gasps out that he gave the information before they caught him to Steve. And then dies.
Yeah.
And they're like, which Steve? And then he comes back to life long enough to go, Steve the bartender, and dies again. And now they need to know, well, which Steve can we trust? Who has the information?
Yeah. If only you didn't name them all Steve, you'd know right off the bat.
If you named them all Steve, then the informant would have put the information somewhere else.
So yeah, it's another thing you can play with. I mean, they're going to have fun with you. You might as well have fun back. I mean, if you have a bunch of players that will take the whole concept completely seriously, then that's awesome. If they're going to have a little bit of fun with it, have a little bit of fun back. I mean, everyone's here to have fun anyways. So
one of the other ones for descriptions is magic and spells.
Yes, absolutely. Huge opportunity for descriptions.
And that's something we've really tried to work on in our games that we run. The Dark Hounds, you do see it a lot. I definitely try when I'm playing Tristan to make the spells and the magic interesting, and the other players at the table are picking up on that. And definitely in games that we're not recording, we try to describe the flavor of the spells, just like you're describing in combat. You have your fighter who's going to do the swings with the sword and the great sword across the chest. Well, why can't the wizard describe how his magic missile, rather than just a bright light at the target, instead shoots straight up into the air and then shrieks in an arc as it goes to its target? And so he's, rather than throwing them out forwards, is throwing them upwards, and they're arcing over the battlefield and making all those wonderful noises like fireworks.
Right? Yeah. I've actually been meaning to talk to Ashley. She uses magic missile fairly often. And I was, obviously it's going to be up to her whether or not she likes this idea or wants to reflavor it yet again. But I was toying with the idea where she's, an Eldritch Knight and she uses a giant greatsword. If she wanted to make it either A, look like she was shooting, the magic missiles, or some appearance-wise, some other sort of energy bolt, like from her sword, to kind of give like a little bit of maybe an anime kind of feel. Or the other concept was to make it look, the idea that I had for her to look like she's actually just throwing swords, even though they're just, magic missiles, so it looks like wham, wham, wham. They're like, oh God, she just threw swords at that guy and they just screwed him up. So yeah, just different ideas for flavoring up spells. When she uses shocking grasp, she's not just going up and touching somebody; she's punching them.
Yep.
So a lot of different things like that.
And knowing where we're at right now in filming and knowing what's been released without giving any spoilers, Tristan is going forward. There's going to be a point where you're going to see some of his spell effects change as part of what the character is going through. Yep. So it's now become part of a narrative, because throughout the game, I've tried to make his spells very descriptive and very evocative, and that it's his spells. And now, as he's gone through these changes and things are starting to shift, we're going to see that as an indication of bigger changes happening in the character overall.
Yeah. Look forward to seeing that being released and playing it.
Yes.
So yeah, lots of opportunities for spells. Spells are a huge area for description, a huge area for personalization for all your spellcasters. And also a huge opportunity for you as the DM to just take advantage of, adding personality to your spellcasters, or even your random NPCs that have like spell-like effects or supernatural abilities. Any kind of situation where like something out of the ordinary is happening, it's a big opportunity for you to add a lot of description to it. Call lightning doesn't have to look the same for everyone. I know it's a bunch of storm cloud coming in and some lightning zapping down, but like that lightning can look different in the storm. Maybe they're like these giant red storm clouds that crawl in. If it's this big demonic NPC that's calling forth the lightning, and something, this isn't normal storm cloud. Something bad's happening.
And I know that just you flavor it with different characters. I know you were telling me about a cleric that used spirit guardians, and it appeared as a giant angel protecting them. And going back to Dark Hounds, Tristan uses spirit guardians, and it looks like a storm and lightning bolts striking down on the enemies.
Right.
We've had an older cleric that actually had angelic forms flying out and flying back and in and out of his weapon that he was wielding. He held it overhead, and they flew in and out of the weapon as a focus for his spells.
Right.
You can use it to identify and individualize your characters by having spells that are the same spells other party members are using, but you have your own flavor to them.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Another little thing, a little subtext to it is that you can have the spell, again, Spirit Guardians, but you can always call it whatever you want in the game. Again, the reference to the giant angelic figure that, kind of smites everyone that gets near this cleric in one of the other games. They don't refer to it as Spirit Guardians. They refer to it as Magic Bell, I believe they refer to it as, because that's the name of the angel or the figure of the angel that kind of smites everyone around him.
Right.
So, that's just another little flavor piece, another little piece of description, to kind of make it their own.
So when we were talking pre-show before we recorded this, Jared came up with the idea of using your players for descriptions for NPCs and locations. My idea for players, it's a little kind of out there, a little kind of experimental, is something I've done in games now and then, which is, as a player, I ask my other players to make rolls for certain purposes. So, for example, they can make a perception check to when they're asking about my character, and I'll give the general description of the character. Oh, you rolled really well on your perception check. You also noticed this.
Yeah.
Or make a perception check to see if you notice something that's changed on the character. Mm-hmm. Again, I don't want to spoil Dark Hounds too much, but we had that situation come up, and I had everybody else make a check, and only David's character, Jarrell, passed the check. So he learned something that had changed that the others didn't. And while it hasn't come into play yet, we still have more episodes to record. We're going to see how that happens.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So yeah, this is definitely going to be, like Jerry said, a little bit more on the experimental side. It's not going to work. I wouldn't say it would be a good idea in every group, but if you have a group of more experienced players, especially if some of those players are also DMs, I would say it's definitely something you can try and see if it works. But the option of having a player call for roles or request roles of other players, typically, it's going to be like a player-to-player kind of thing. Most commonly, situation, I think, is going to be like perception checks, like Jerry mentioned.
Or deception versus insight.
Yeah, different social checks of some sort. Like, okay, well, oh, you're going to lie to my face? Okay, well, as a player, I know you're lying to my face, and that's fine. If the DM, again, this is assuming that the DM's not already calling for these rolls, but like, hey, why don't you make me a deception check real quick? I'm going to roll an insight check and see if my dude figures this out. Like, I, as a player, want to know this or know that this is a situation. Let's make the rolls to make sure that what happens in game is staying in game and we're using the correct rolls for it. And I'm not just going along with your craziness just because, you know what I mean? So, and that's, again, that's if the DM is willing to kind of let these rolls happen, you know, kind of take their hand off the trigger. I'm totally for the idea, you know, with the right groups. And the Darkhounds group, I think it can work. You know, they're mostly experienced players. You know, several of them have DM. Jerry obviously has plenty of DM experience. But it's one of those, you don't want it to get out of hand. You don't want it to go crazy. And it has definitely a possibility of, you know, you spending half the night with players trying to call for rolls to each other.
All right. I have the idea now of having the fun situation of a player is telling the truth. Another player thinks they may be lying. They do, okay, I'll roll deception, you roll insight. Okay, I rolled a 15 on my insight, and the player that rolled deception said, well, you know, you still think I'm telling the truth. Even though they may have rolled poorly, you think I'm telling the truth because I am.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Just to keep that a little more of that difference between player knowledge, character knowledge, that I personally love so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So those were just a couple of the ideas that we came up with to help make it so that everything that needs to be done at the table isn't on the DM, because we're about running games and we're about making things easier, because the easier it is, the more you can focus on having fun.
So thank you for joining us for our show today. As always, if you have any comments on today's topics or any stories you'd like to share about how you used it in your game, feel free to get in touch with us. Also, if there's anything you'd like to hear us discuss, let us know. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/GameMasters Studio. Subscribe for exclusive access to early content and also a few other special surprises and tricks we've been putting up there. You can get in touch with us on Twitter. We are GMS Studios. Available on Facebook for you to like, comment, and subscribe. And we have new episodes coming out every week with more information on running your game. We're posting them on Podbean at GameMasterStudio.podbean.com, through iTunes, and available now on YouTube as well. Speaking of YouTube, check out our Darkhounds 360 VR campaign. Watch us play through, use the tips that you see here, and occasionally miss an opportunity. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your support. We'll see you the next time that we get back into the studio.